The movie opens as a big, burly brown horse suddenly appears in the middle of a green pasture. The animal looks surprised to be there and looks around, as if to make sense of what just happened. It then starts running towards a house at the edge of the pasture. In a surprising twist of events, it breaks through the front door, and we get a bit of narration from the horse's point of view. It introduces itself as Beckett, and says he is supposed to be a tiny cat and not a horse. Nonetheless, Beckett, in his horse form, breaks into the house. This event startles a professor named Craven, as the horse unexpectedly throws him out of a window for no apparent reason. We then shift to the start of Beckett's story when he was a small cat, meowing at the front door of an abandoned house. He doesn't realize that the home has been long sold. Soon after, a young woman named Rose receives a call from Professor Craven asking about her bee research project, which she must present to the town council. While driving and talking on the phone, Rose nearly hits Beckett. Sensing an opportunity, Beckett pretends to be hurt, hoping to gain Rose's sympathy. Thinking she's injured the cat, Rose panics and notices a sign for an animal shelter. Rose takes Beckett to the shelter, run by a woman named June. After examining Beckett, June assures Rose that the cat is fine, humorously mentioning that Beckett has 9 lives. June then suggests Rose take Beckett home as there's nothing to worry about. Though hesitant at first due to her workload, Rose eventually decides to adopt Beckett. Beckett is overjoyed to have found a new home. From that day on, Beckett accompanies Rose in her daily activities. Being a curious young cat, Beckett often explores, even showing interest in bees. One day, Beckett gets stung while playing with a bee, and Rose carefully removes the stinger from his paw. Time passes, and Beckett grows into a large cat. One day, a blue car pulls up in front of Rose's house, and it turns out to be her ex-boyfriend, Larry. Though Larry appears laid back, he is actually knowledgeable about bees. He was supposed to help with Rose's bee research project, but he preferred surfing instead. Beckett immediately dislikes Larry and even attacks him for no reason. It's soon revealed that Larry is allergic to cats, causing him to sneeze uncontrollably. This sparks an idea in Rose to research allergies related to bees. Impressed by Larry's intelligence, she watches as he begins working on a formula for a bee serum. Despite this, Beckett continues to dislike Larry and devises plans to get rid of him. Beckett even steps on the pizza Larry bought, making his allergy worse when he eats it. Realizing Beckett is behind this, Rose decides to kick Beckett out of the house. Unwilling to give up, Beckett tries to sneak back in through the cat door, but he's too big to fit and ends up spending the night in a pile of garbage. Later, Beckett overhears that Larry is planning to drive and hatches a scheme to loosen the bolts on his car's wheels. However, Rose and Larry decide to take Rose's car instead, and Beckett's plan backfires, resulting in him getting crushed by Larry's car when the loose wheels give way. Unexpectedly, Beckett finds himself in another realm, transported to a place resembling a court in the afterlife. There, he sees other cats waiting for their turn to be judged. Meanwhile, Rose and Larry visit Professor Craven to present their findings on bee allies. Impressed, Craven is eager to see the bee serum produced, but after they leave, he orders his subordinates to sabotage Rose's research. Back in the afterlife, Beckett, bored with waiting, tries to manipulate his queue number. A clerk, who looks a lot like June, informs Beckett that he's used up all 9 of his lives due to his mischief. There's a chance he'll be sent to hell. Desperate, Beckett begs for a second chance, feeling indebted to Rose for adopting him. Moved by his plea, the clerk grants Beckett another 9 lives, giving him a fresh start. Meanwhile, Rose continues searching for Beckett, who has gone missing from the house. Back in the living world, Beckett decides to rest in Rose's room. The next morning, Rose is startled to find a weasel in her room, unaware that the weasel is actually Beckett. In a panic, Rose tries to chase the weasel away, not realizing it's really Beckett. Outside, Beckett spots Larry and attempts to attack him, but instead, he gets shocked by an electric wire, sending him back to the afterlife court. There, Beckett complains about being brought back as a weasel. June explains that each time Beckett is reincarnated, he will return as a different animal, and now Beckett only has 8 lives left. June insists that Beckett must accept these consequences. This time, Beckett is brought back as a mouse. Meanwhile, Professor Craven is furious with his subordinates for failing their mission. He reveals that the real reason he wants to eliminate the bees is that, as a child, he was stung by one and mocked by others. Elsewhere, Rose and Larry are making posters to search for Beckett, as Rose still hopes to find him. Beckett, now outside the window, becomes even more irritated seeing Rose and Larry growing closer. He tries to sneak back into the house through the chimney, but just as he's about to jump in, an eagle snatches him and returns him to the afterlife court. This time, June is frustrated with Beckett's repeated returns. She reincarnates him as a cockroach. Beckett then sees that Rose and Larry seem to have given up searching for him. When Larry sits on Beckett's favorite pillow, the upset cockroach crawls into Larry's shirt. At that moment, Rose receives a call from Professor Craven. Rose sighs heavily as she shares with Larry the details of the recent series of unfortunate and difficult events that have turned her life upside down. She explains how her meticulously maintained beehive is destroyed, a loss that deeply hurts her efforts to support her research. More heartbreakingly, she recounts the mysterious and sudden disappearance of her beloved cat, Beckett, whose absence leaves a void in her life that no other companion can fill. Beckett is more than just a pet. He is a source of comfort, joy, and inspiration during her most challenging moments. Larry, sensing her sadness, listens attentively and then tries to console her with reassuring words. He reminds Rose of all the efforts they have made together to locate Beckett and to salvage what remains of her work. He tells her softly that they have done everything within their power to find Beckett, and that perhaps it is time to shift their focus toward her research project. Encouraged, though still weighed down by the events, Rose decides to channel her energy into moving forward. She resolves to focus on her research, even if doing so means accepting that she might never find Beckett. Meanwhile, in a seemingly unrelated incident, Beckett's mischievous curiosity gets the better of him. While wandering around the house unnoticed, he finds himself tangled in some paperwork left carelessly on the table. In a sudden and unforeseen accident, the edges of a paper cut through Beckett, sending him spiraling back to the enigmatic and surreal afterlife court where his previous incarnations have led him. Once again, Beckett finds himself standing before June, the sassy and seemingly all-knowing clerk who manages the affairs of reincarnation. Frustrated but determined, Beckett pleads with June that this time he wants to come back as an animal that can communicate directly with humans. In his mind, it is the only way he can make Rose understand who he is. After a thoughtful pause, June, moved by Beckett's earnestness, agrees to his request. With a wave of her hand, she transforms Beckett into a vibrant parrot and sends him back to the mortal realm. Not long after, Rose makes her way to the animal shelter. Her intention is simple. She wants to drop off the belongings that once belonged to Beckett, as a way of closing that chapter of her life. Her heart feels heavy as she hands over the small items: a favorite toy, a cozy blanket, and a worn collar. Unbeknownst to her, Beckett, now in his parrot form, watches her from a perch nearby. Filled with excitement and determination, he tries to speak, flapping his colorful wings and squawking loudly to get her attention. However, his words are garbled and indistinct, and Rose, unable to recognize the familiar soul within the bird, dismisses the parrot as just another noisy animal. Larry, who accompanies Rose to the shelter, takes a moment to reflect on their shared loss. He admits he misses Beckett too, although he had never previously shown it outright. These words strike a chord in Beckett, filling him with a pang of guilt. He remembers the many times he has been deliberately difficult toward Larry, especially out of jealousy. Now, he wishes he can take back those moments and express some form of apology. As Rose and Larry finish their errand and prepare to leave, they glance back one last time. Beckett, perched silently on the railing, watches them go, his heart heavy with regret and longing. While Rose and Larry return home, Beckett resolves to find another way to make his presence known and perhaps earn back the place he once held in their lives. When some of Larry's items tumble to the ground, Beckett meets a tragic end, crushed beneath the falling debris. Yet, his journey doesn't end there. In a twist of fate, he is reincarnated once again, this time as a loyal and determined dog. With his newfound form comes an acute sense of smell and an instinctive drive to protect those he cares about. Beckett, undeterred by the circumstances, uses his tracking abilities to find his way back to Rose's house. As he makes his way through fields and streets, Beckett picks up an ominous scent. Following the trail, he spots two of Professor Craven's henchmen lurking in the shadows near Rose's house. They are carefully observing the home, clearly up to no good. Meanwhile, inside the house, Rose and Larry are celebrating a significant breakthrough in their research. After painstaking efforts, they have successfully created the bee serum they had been working on. Testing the serum proves to be a remarkable success. The bees, previously erratic and aggressive, finally return to their normal, harmonious behavior. Unbeknownst to Rose and Larry, Craven's henchmen are privy to this triumph and quickly hatch a sinister plan to destroy Rose's research, ensuring their boss's control over the project. Beckett, with his sharp instincts and unwavering resolve, senses the danger. Determined to protect Rose and Larry, he waits for the perfect moment to intervene. When the henchmen attempt to flee in their car after carrying out their nefarious deeds, Beckett springs into action. He races after the vehicle with the speed and tenacity of a dog on a mission. Leaping onto the moving car, he sinks his teeth into one of the men, causing chaos inside the vehicle. The driver, startled and losing control, veers off course, sending the car hurtling toward a boulder near the edge of a steep cliff. The impact is catastrophic. The car crashes into the boulder with a deafening thud, teetering dangerously close to the edge. Beckett, flung from the vehicle by the force of the collision, plummets into the churning sea below. The cold water envelops him, and his current life comes to an end. Yet, Beckett's story is far from over. Once again, he is reincarnated, this time as a fish, ready to continue his journey and face whatever challenges await him in his next form. Inside his dimly lit office, Professor Craven sat with a stern expression, his eyes widening in disbelief as he was informed of Rose and Larry's rapid progress. The bee serum, which had taken so long to perfect, had been completed sooner than he could have anticipated. He was both impressed and irritated by their success. Craven, ever the opportunist, quickly commanded Rose to present her findings to the town council immediately. He knew that with this serum, her research could win the support necessary to promote bee conservation, a cause that threatened his own financial ambitions. As soon as Rose and Larry left, Craven's demeanor shifted from surprise to fury. He turned his attention to his subordinates, scolding them harshly for their failure to stop Rose's work. His voice dripped with frustration as he reminded them that they had a crucial role to play in keeping the progress of the bee serum in check. But Craven's true intentions went far beyond mere sabotage. The real reason he wanted to thwart Rose's efforts was to corner the market on artificial bees. He had spent years developing his robotic bees, which could serve as a replacement for the real creatures. His plan was to sell them to industries and farmers who needed pollination, and the success of Rose's research would put his entire operation in jeopardy. Craven had designed the robotic bees to be controlled by a special pair of gloves, which allowed him to manipulate a swarm of them at will. He believed that by replacing the natural bees with his mechanical versions, he would control the future of agriculture. If Rose succeeded in showing the town council the importance of saving the real bees, it could mean the end of his plans for good. Meanwhile, Beckett, still struggling in his new aquatic form, had become keenly aware of Craven's sinister plot. His instincts, honed through countless reincarnations, told him that he had to stop Craven before it was too late. Beckett made his way through the vast aquarium, desperately searching for a way to escape. After navigating through tanks and slipping past various obstacles, he found himself in an unlikely place: Craven's drink. Craven, too distracted by his thoughts of conquest and control, had no idea that Beckett had ended up in his glass. He carelessly lifted the drink to his lips and took a sip, not noticing the small fish within. The moment the fish went down, Craven began to cough and choke, gagging on the unexpected obstruction. His flailing hands caused the special gloves he wore to get soaked with the liquid, and to his horror, the malfunctioning gloves caused the robotic bees he had so carefully controlled to go haywire. As Craven struggled, Beckett, having narrowly escaped from his mouth, seized the opportunity. With a burst of energy, he swam to freedom, only to be snatched up by an eagle soaring outside the window. The bird carried Beckett high into the sky, and as he clutched the air with his talons, Beckett was once again whisked away to the afterlife court. The cycle of reincarnation would continue, and with it, Beckett's determination to thwart Craven's evil plans. June, who has been observing all of Beckett's actions, realizes that Beckett is trying to help Rose. She then reincarnates Beckett as a horse, the same horse seen at the beginning of the story. Meanwhile, Rose and Larry successfully produce more serum for their presentation. When Rose notices a horse in her yard, she and Larry decide to return it to where it came from. During their journey, they watch the sunset over a cliff, and the shared experience helps rekindle their relationship. At the same time, Professor Craven secretly sneaks into Rose's house with the intent to destroy the serum they've created. Beckett, seeing Craven's evil plan, attempts to stop him. Though Beckett manages to thwart Craven's scheme, his actions cause chaos in the laboratory. Hearing the commotion, Rose and Larry rush back inside. When they arrive, they find the lab in disarray. Believing Beckett is to blame, Rose orders the horse to leave. Despite the lab being a mess, Larry discovers one intact bottle of serum, giving them a glimmer of hope. Feeling useless, Beckett pleads with June to bring him back to the afterlife, saying his mission is complete, and he no longer wants to return to the living world. Since Beckett still has 2 lives left, June encourages him not to give up and to continue helping Rose. Meanwhile, Rose and Larry are ready to present their serum to the town council. However, Professor Craven has a devious plan and orders his subordinates to sabotage the presentation by switching the real serum with a toxic one. Beckett, reincarnated as a bee, witnesses the preparations for the sabotage. As the presentation begins, Craven's henchmen swap the real serum with the poisoned one. Beckett, seeing this, tries to warn Larry. Despite Larry's efforts to stop them, he fails. When the toxic serum is sprayed, the bees in the aquarium die from the poison. Beckett, refusing to stay idle, stings one of Craven's henchmen but ends up dying himself. Rose's presentation ends in failure, and Professor Craven steps in to take control, revealing that he set Rose up to fail so he could promote his robotic bees. Disheartened by Craven's actions, Rose is devastated. Meanwhile, Beckett begs for one last chance to return to the world and help Rose. Moved by his determination, June grants his wish and reincarnates Beckett as a cat once again. Beckett immediately attacks Craven's henchmen, causing one of them to knock over a curtain. At that moment, Larry quickly reveals that the two were attempting sabotage. Fearing punishment, the henchmen confess that everything was Craven's idea. With his plan falling apart, Professor Craven activates his robotic bees to attack Rose. Rose tries to flee from the swarm, but Craven, while chasing her, trips and is stung by his own creations. Meanwhile, Rose leaps into the water to escape the robotic bees but begins to drown. Not long after, Beckett appears and saves Rose. However, because cats cannot swim, Beckett starts to sink. Realizing he has used up all 9 of his lives, Beckett accepts his fate and prepares to leave for the afterlife. Years later, at an animal shelter, a young child arrives to adopt a kitten. It turns out the kitten is the reincarnation of Beckett, and the child is Rose and Larry's son. After adopting the kitten, the family goes home together, marking a new beginning.